What if the most profound capacity for good in a person was also the source of their most terrifying potential? What if the very tools used to heal and understand could, in a different light, be used to manipulate and control with chilling precision? We're not talking about supervillains or cartoonish evil. We're talking about something far more subtle, far more real, and frankly, far more dangerous because it walks among us, often completely unseen. We're talking about the rarest personality type in the world, the INFJ, and we're going to explore a provocative idea today: that the most dangerous empath is the one with an INFJ brain. Now, hold on, don't get your knickers in a twist. When we say dangerous, we don't necessarily mean they're lurking in dark alleys. This isn't about physical threat. This is about a psychological depth so profound that when its balance is lost, the fallout can be catastrophic for the people caught in its wake. We're diving deep into the work of Carl Jung to understand how this beautiful, complex mind works, and how its shadow side can emerge. So buckle up. This is going to be a journey into the labyrinth of the human psyche, the empathy that goes beyond feeling. Now, let's talk about empathy, but forget everything you think you know about the word. Most people throw around empathy when they really mean sympathy or just basic human decency. Real empathy, the kind we're discussing here, is something else entirely. It's not just understanding that someone's upset. It's experiencing their emotional state as if it were your own. Imagine walking into a room and instantly feeling the residual tension from an argument that happened 20 minutes before you arrived. Picture sensing someone's grief before they've even mentioned their loss. Think about knowing your friend is angry despite their cheerful facade, and not just knowing it intellectually, but feeling that anger radiating through your own chest. That's what empaths live with daily. Now amplify that with an INFJ's cognitive functions, and you've got something that borders on psychological superpowers. Carl Jung spent considerable time exploring what he termed the feeling function in his psychological type theory. He recognized that some individuals possessed highly developed feeling capabilities that went far beyond emotional sensitivity. They could evaluate, assess, and understand emotional content with the precision that others might apply to mathematical equations. For INFJs, this feeling function combines with their dominant introverted intuition to create something unprecedented. They don't just feel your current emotional state. They intuitively grasp where that emotion came from, what childhood experiences might have shaped it, how it connects to your behavioral patterns, and where it's likely leading you. It's like having X-ray vision, but for the human psyche instead of physical objects. And here's the part that should make you sit up and pay attention. They can usually do this within minutes of meeting you. Not fully, of course, but they'll have gathered enough data points to start building a working model of who you are at your core. You think you're just making small talk about the weather or traffic. They're conducting a psychological assessment that would take most trained therapists several sessions to achieve. When insight becomes weaponry. All right, let's address what you're probably thinking. Dangerous sounds harsh. It sounds like we're painting INFJs as villains in some psychological thriller. But stick with me because the truth is more nuanced and more important than simple good versus evil. Power is dangerous. Not necessarily evil, not inherently malicious, but dangerous nonetheless. Fire keeps us warm and cooks our food, but it also burns down forests. Water sustains all life, but floods destroy everything in their path. The INFJ's psychological insight operates on the same principle. The tool itself is neutral. The danger lies in how it's wielded. Consider what it means to truly understand someone. Not surface-level understanding, but the deep kind. You know their insecurities, the ones they hide even from themselves. You understand their deepest fears, their most desperate desires, their unhealed wounds. You can predict how they'll react in almost any situation. You know exactly what words will comfort them, inspire them, devastate them, or control them. That's not hypothetical power. That's the kind of influence that shapes lives, redirects destinies, and changes the fundamental course of human relationships. And INFJs possess it naturally, the way some people possess athletic ability or musical talent. Jung warned about this in his work. He talked extensively about the shadow, the dark side of every personality trait and ability. He understood that the same psychological gifts that could heal could also harm. The same intuition that allows someone to guide others toward wholeness could be twisted to manipulate them toward destruction. An unhealthy INFJ, one who's been hurt, betrayed, or simply never learned to use their abilities ethically, becomes what modern psychology might call a dark empath. They retain all the perceptive abilities, all the understanding, all the insight, but instead of using these gifts to help others, they deploy them strategically for personal gain. The terrifying part isn't that they might lash out in obvious ways. It's that they won't need to. They can orchestrate your downfall so subtly that you'll think it was entirely your own fault. They can manipulate social dynamics so skillfully that entire groups turn against someone without anyone realizing they've been influenced. They can emotionally devastate someone with a single, perfectly chosen sentence, and then offer comfort for the wound they just inflicted. The legendary door slam. Psychological excommunication. You want to talk about dangerous? Let's discuss what happens when an INFJ decides you're no longer worth their energy. It's called the door slam, and if you've never experienced it, consider yourself fortunate. If you have experienced it, you know exactly why it deserves its own section in this discussion. Picture this scenario. You've got an INFJ in your life, maybe a friend, a romantic partner, a colleague. They've been patient with you, incredibly patient. They've understood your flaws, made excuses for your behavior, given you second chances and third chances and chances you didn't even realize you needed. They've tried to help you grow, tried to communicate their boundaries, tried to make the relationship work. And then something shifts. You might not even notice what caused it. Maybe you crossed a line you didn't know existed. Maybe you repeated a harmful pattern one too many times. Maybe they finally recognized that you're never going to change or that the relationship is fundamentally toxic to their well-being. What happens next is surgical, cold, complete. The door doesn't just close, it slams shut with a finality that's almost existential. And here's what makes it genuinely frightening. There's no going back, ever. You can beg, plead, apologize, promise to change, send letters, show up at their door. None of it matters. In their mind, you've been moved from the people in my life category to the people who no longer exist category. But the really unsettling aspect? They'll often execute this with absolute calm. No screaming matches. No dramatic confrontations. No burning your clothes in the front yard. They'll just disappear. Calls go to voicemail. Messages get one-word responses, if any. If you're in the same social circle, they'll be polite but distant, like you're an acquaintance they vaguely remember meeting once. Carl Jung would have understood this as a protective mechanism of the introverted psyche. He recognized that introverted types built elaborate internal worlds and that they protected these worlds fiercely. When someone became a threat to their psychological safety, they had to be removed. Not gradually, not partially, but completely and permanently. What makes this dangerous is the absolute nature of it. There's no appeal process, no chance for rehabilitation, no possibility of redemption. An INFJ has already played out every scenario in their head before they execute the door slam. They've considered whether you might change, weighed the potential for reconciliation, and concluded that cutting you off entirely is the only viable option. By the time you realize what's happening, the decision was made weeks or months ago. Becoming your mirror, the reflection you can't escape. There's a particular phenomenon that happens when you spend time around a highly perceptive INFJ that most people find deeply uncomfortable, even though they can't quite articulate why. The INFJ becomes a mirror, not reflecting your physical appearance, but reflecting your authentic self back at you in ways that make it impossible to maintain your carefully constructed personas. Jung talked extensively about the shadow self, all the parts of our personality that we repress, deny, or hide from consciousness. He believed that psychological wholeness required confronting and integrating these shadow aspects. But most people spend their entire lives avoiding this confrontation. It's painful, it's scary, it threatens our self-image. INFJs don't let you avoid it. Not intentionally, necessarily, but their presence alone forces confrontation with your shadow. They see the things you're trying to hide. They notice the patterns you're repeating. They recognize the lies you tell yourself. And even when they don't verbally call you out on these things, you can feel their awareness of them. It changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. Imagine you're someone who prides themselves on being independent and self-sufficient, but you're actually deeply codependent and constantly seeking validation. You've convinced yourself and most people around you of your independence narrative. But when you're around an INFJ, you can feel them seeing through it. They notice how you change your opinions based on who you're talking to. They observe how you subtly seek approval in every interaction. They recognize the anxiety that underlies your performance of confidence. They might never say a word about it directly, but you know that they know. And that awareness creates a kind of psychological pressure that can be incredibly destabilizing. You can't hide from someone who sees through all your defenses. You can't maintain your masks around someone who recognizes them as masks. This mirroring ability makes INFJs powerfully effective therapists and counselors when they choose to channel it constructively. They can reflect people's shadows back to them in ways that facilitate growth and healing. But it also means they can weaponize this ability, using it to destabilize someone's sense of self, to make them question their own reality, to leave them feeling exposed and vulnerable. The danger isn't necessarily that they'll use this power maliciously. The danger is simply that the power exists. Being around someone who sees all of you, the good, the bad, the hidden, the shameful, is inherently destabilizing. Some people experience it as liberating. Others find it threatening. Either way, it's a form of psychological nakedness that most humans instinctively resist. The advisor's throne. Invisible power structures. Throughout human history, there's been a particular archetype that wields enormous power while remaining largely invisible to those who don't understand how influence works. Not the king, but the advisor. Not the general, but the strategist. Not the celebrity, but the publicist. The person who shapes decisions without being the public face of those decisions. INFJs naturally gravitate toward or find themselves pulled into this archetype. Jung didn't specifically name it as such, but his work on psychological types and archetypes laid the groundwork for understanding this pattern. The wise counselor, the trusted advisor, the person others turn to when they need guidance on the most important decisions of their lives. This role carries immense power that most people don't recognize until they step back and analyze the actual influence patterns. When you're the person everyone comes to for advice, when you're the one helping people make major life decisions, when you're shaping how people think about themselves and their situations, you're essentially directing the course of multiple lives simultaneously. And here's what makes it particularly potent. It doesn't feel like power to the person receiving the advice. They think they're making their own decisions. They believe they're choosing their own path. They feel empowered and supported. But the framing, the questions asked, the options presented, the perspectives offered, all of these shape the decision in profound ways. A healthy INFJ uses this position to genuinely help people find their own truth, to facilitate authentic self-discovery, to empower others to make decisions aligned with their values. They're skilled at asking the right questions rather than providing answers, at creating space for people to reach their own conclusions. But an unhealthy or manipulative INFJ can use this same position to steer people exactly where they want them to go while making them feel like it was their own idea all along. They can plant suggestions that grow into convictions. They can frame choices in ways that make one option obviously better than others. They can shape someone's entire worldview over time, and that person will never recognize the manipulation because it never felt like manipulation. It felt like support and understanding. The really insidious part is that this kind of influence is almost impossible to detect in the moment. It's only in retrospect, sometimes years later, that people realize how much their decisions were shaped by a particular person's guidance. And even then, they might not feel manipulated because the guidance was framed as helping them discover their own truth. The unspoken language. Fluency in what's not said. Most human communication happens beneath the surface of actual words. Tone, body language, microexpressions, energy, what's carefully avoided, what's emphasized, the timing of pauses. This is where the real conversation occurs. And INFJs are native speakers of this unspoken language in a way that most other types simply aren't. Carl Jung recognized the importance of nonverbal and symbolic communication in his therapeutic work. He understood that what patients didn't say was often more significant than what they did say. He learned to read dreams, symbols, slips of the tongue, and behavioral patterns as communications from the unconscious mind. INFJs apply this same principle to everyday interactions. They're reading the subtext of every conversation, interpreting the meaning behind the meaning, understanding what's being communicated through what's being avoided. It's like they're listening to two conversations simultaneously, the surface level one that everyone can hear, and the deeper one that's happening in the spaces between words. This ability makes them exceptional at navigating complex social situations. They can sense tension before it becomes obvious. They understand alliance patterns in groups. They recognize when someone's words don't match their feelings. They can detect lies not because they're inherently suspicious, but because they perceive the dissonance between verbal and nonverbal communication. But flip this ability to its darker application, and you've got someone who knows exactly how to deceive because they understand all the subtle signals that typically give deception away. They know how to craft messages that carry multiple meanings, saying one thing on the surface while communicating something entirely different to those who can read the subtext. They can manipulate conversations in ways that leave no evidence, no concrete proof of wrongdoing, because the manipulation happens entirely in the realm of implications and suggestions. Imagine trying to confront someone about manipulative behavior when everything they've said has been technically supportive and kind. Imagine explaining to others that you feel controlled by someone who has never given you a direct order or explicit demand. The manipulation happens through tone, through careful word choice, through strategic timing, through implications, all things that are nearly impossible to prove or even articulate clearly. This is where the danger of the INFJ empath becomes most subtle and most difficult to defend against. They're not doing anything obvious. They're not saying anything overtly harmful. But the effect is profound nonetheless, shaped entirely through mastery of the unspoken dimensions of communication. The strategy of patience. Victory in years, not moments. While other personality types are thinking in terms of immediate wins and losses, INFJs are playing a game with a timeline measured in years or even decades. This long-term strategic thinking, combined with their ability to read people and situations, makes them formidably effective at achieving their goals, whatever those goals might be. Jung's concept of the perspective function of dreams and intuition is relevant here. He believed that the psyche could perceive not just current reality but future possibilities, and that some individuals were particularly gifted at perceiving these future trajectories. For INFJs, this manifests as an ability to see the long game, to understand how small actions today create large effects tomorrow. In practical terms, this means an INFJ might plant an idea in your head in January, knowing it won't fully take root until June, positioning themselves for an opportunity they've foreseen in December. They're not impulsive. They're not reactive. They're extraordinarily patient, willing to wait for exactly the right moment to make their move. This patience is a weapon that most people don't even recognize as such. We're conditioned to watch for immediate threats, obvious aggressions, clear competitions. But someone who's willing to wait months or years to achieve a goal, someone who can maintain a strategy across that kind of timeline, they're operating on a level that most people can't even perceive, let alone defend against. An INFJ might befriend someone knowing they'll need that relationship 3 years from now. They might accept a seemingly disadvantageous position now because they can see how it positions them perfectly for future opportunities. They might endure years of difficulty because they've intuited that staying the course will eventually lead to exactly where they need to be. When used positively, this manifests as the ability to build meaningful careers, lasting relationships, and genuine legacy. An INFJ can envision the life they want and systematically, patiently build toward it, making small decisions daily that align with long-term vision. When used manipulatively, though, this becomes something darker. Imagine someone who's been positioning themselves for years to gain power over you, your career, your social circle, and you never saw it coming because each individual action seemed benign, even helpful. By the time you recognize the pattern, they've already won the game you didn't know you were playing. Loneliness at the summit. The isolation of seeing too much. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough in conversations about INFJs and empaths: the profound loneliness that comes with this level of perception. It's a particular kind of isolation that's hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it, but it's crucial to understanding both the light and shadow sides of the INFJ personality. When you can see through almost everyone you meet, genuine connection becomes extraordinarily rare. The It's like being the only adult at a children's party. You're participating in the activities, you're interacting with others, but there's a part of you that's always observing from the outside, always aware of the performance, always conscious of the gap between your level of perception and everyone else's. Jung wrote about the isolation of the introverted intuitive type, noting that they often felt misunderstood by the world around them. Their rich inner life, their perception of patterns and meanings invisible to others, their focus on future possibilities rather than present realities. All of this created a barrier between them and most other people. For INFJs, this isolation is compounded by their empathic abilities. They're constantly feeling others' emotions, understanding others' motivations, perceiving others' shadow selves. But who understands them? Who sees their shadows? Who recognizes when they're struggling beneath a facade of composure? Usually no one. They become experts at helping others feel understood while remaining fundamentally unseen themselves. They're the therapist who never goes to therapy, the counselor who has no one to counsel them, the emotional support for everyone else with no one to lean on themselves. This chronic isolation can make INFJs dangerous in an indirect way. When someone feels perpetually misunderstood and alone, they sometimes stop caring about maintaining connections according to conventional social rules. They might begin viewing relationships as transactional rather than meaningful. They might protect themselves so fiercely that they become cold, using their abilities to keep people at a safe distance rather than to build genuine intimacy. The chess master's game, social architecture. Let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable: the way highly developed INFJs can essentially architect social dynamics to produce specific outcomes. Not through obvious manipulation or coercion, but through subtle influence applied at strategic pressure points over time. Jung's work on psychological types included recognition that different types had different forms of power and influence. He understood that some individuals had a natural gift for shaping group dynamics, for recognizing the hidden structures of social interaction and knowing exactly where to apply pressure to change those structures. INFJs excel at this. They can enter a group and quickly map out the unspoken hierarchy, the hidden alliances, the unresolved tensions, the emotional undercurrents. They see the social architecture, not just who reports to whom officially, but who actually influences whom, who respects whom, who resents whom, where the real power flows. And once they see this architecture, they can redesign it. Not obviously, not with dramatic interventions, but with carefully chosen words to specific people at specific times. A suggestion here, a revelation there, connection made, confidence shared, an alliance strengthened, attention subtly amplified. Over time, the entire social structure shifts. Hierarchies change. Alliances reform. Power flows in new directions. And if you asked anyone in the group how it happened, they probably couldn't tell you. It seemed natural, inevitable, just the way things evolved. But an INFJ at the center of it was essentially conducting an orchestra, each interaction a note in a larger composition that only they could hear in its entirety. In positive applications, this ability allows INFJs to create healthier group dynamics, to bridge divides, to elevate marginalized voices, to build communities based on authentic connection rather than superficial hierarchy. They can be the person who helps dysfunctional teams function, who facilitates genuine collaboration, who creates environments where people feel safe to be authentic. The healer and the destroyer, two sides of one coin. We've arrived at the central paradox that makes INFJs genuinely dangerous in the truest sense of the word. The same psychological toolkit that enables profound healing also enables profound harm. The same deep understanding of human nature that can guide someone through their darkest moments can be used to push them deeper into darkness. The knife that cuts away cancer can also cut the throat. Carl Jung was obsessed with this duality. His concept of the shadow, his work on the integration of opposites, his understanding that every psychological trait contained both constructive and destructive potential, all of this speaks to the core truth about INFJs. They are simultaneously the most capable healers and the most capable destroyers in the psychological realm. Consider the skills involved. An INFJ knows exactly what you need to hear to feel understood, validated, seen. They can create a space of such safety and acceptance that you'll share things you've never shared with anyone. They can reflect your experiences back to you in ways that help you make sense of trauma, integrate difficult experiences, and move toward wholeness. But flip those exact same skills to malicious application, and they know exactly what to say to make you feel worthless, isolated, crazy. They can create an environment where you doubt your own perceptions, question your own sanity, feel fundamentally flawed at your core. They can reframe your experiences in ways that increase trauma rather than healing it, that create fragmentation rather than integration. The tool is identical, only the intention differs. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many INFJs walk a tightrope between these two applications throughout their lives. They feel the pull of both the light and the shadow. They're conscious of their power to heal and their power to harm, and they must make daily, moment-by-moment choices about how to wield their abilities. Conclusion: wielding the double-edged sword with wisdom. So here we are at the end of our journey into the psychology of the INFJ empath, having explored territories that might have made you uncomfortable, revealed truths that might have been difficult to face, and examined a personality type that embodies some of humanity's greatest potentials, for both extraordinary good and significant harm. What Carl Jung's theories ultimately teach us is that human psychology is never simple, never one-dimensional, never purely good or purely evil. Every trait, every ability, every gift carries within it the seeds of both creation and destruction. The INFJ empath simply demonstrates this principle more clearly than most other types. Their danger lies not in some inherent maliciousness. Most INFJs are deeply ethical, profoundly caring individuals who use their abilities to make the world better. The danger lies in the sheer magnitude of psychological power they possess. Power to influence, to shape, to read, to predict, to reflect, to guide. Power that most people don't recognize until they've already been affected by it. Understanding this power is crucial. Not to fear it, but to respect it. Not to avoid INFJs, but to appreciate the responsibility that comes with their level of perception. And for INFJs themselves, to recognize that their gifts are exactly that, gifts that require ethical stewardship, conscious intention, and ongoing self-examination. If you're fortunate enough to have an INFJ in your life who's chosen to use their abilities for good, cherish them. They'll understand you in ways no one else can. They'll see your potential when you can't see it yourself. They'll stick with you through difficulties that would drive others away. They'll offer insights that change your life's trajectory for the better.